We have Hunter, and we have a very amusing card to start with, which is Sasquatch. 7 cost 4/5 Beast. With battle card, repeat each card you played last turn. Notably, repeat is the same as recast in this. It's just because it is a parrot. That's why it says repeat. This is clearly a card that has a lot of crazy options, right? If you just play like, anything hugely powerful, if you play a bunch of things, I think this is definitely a very very cool card with a lot of options. You will not get battle cries from the effects that happen. Notably, battle cries whenever you sort of replay a card, it has to be battle cry is specifically if this is played from your hand that it works. It's hard to even really consider what are all the possible implications of this because it's literally you can use this with anything. I would expect things like big minions. I would expect like some sort of like damage combo stuff. I am curious if it's exactly like a test that just replays them randomly, or if it like recasts them at the same targets if you can. I'm gonna guess it's probably tests and not able to recast all of your like quick shots at your opponent's face or whatever. But yeah, imagine this on like a turn after you like play Marin, play Wand, play a bunch of stuff from the Wand, or like play Wand into things, and then play this. The next turn you get the Wand back replayed and all the things that you played for free. Um, Very powerful. It is also notably, this is a card that someone can tourist for, right? Priest can tourist for this. There's the Priest Hunter tourist card. So Priest could do a crazy, crazy bunch of stuff and have this as the one card from that they get from Hunter in order to do this. So that's cool, right? That's actually one of the interesting things with tourist that you could possibly do. Next up, Death Roll. 5 cost spell. Destroy an enemy minion. Deal damage equal to its attack randomly split among all enemies. So yeah, you don't want to play just like say a Fanatum against a hunter. This is gonna blow up all your stuff. This is a powerful card. It is it is a 5 cost spell that doesn't do anything if your opponent doesn't have a minion. But it is the first like targeted minion removal, like direct, like hey, this card alone kills your minion of my choice that I think has ever existed in Hunter. And obviously, if you're playing big stuff, this can just nuke your opponent's face. They have like a giant taunt. If they have just like a huge minion of any kind, it is super situational, right? Like if you're playing this against like a deck full of small minions, this card's gonna be absolute trash. But it is a very very powerful way to bash through big minions that would otherwise potentially be a problem. Next we have Bird Watching. Discover minion from your deck. Give all copies of it +2/+1 wherever they are. Very similar to the Wrangler, Warsong Wrangler, which was just a 3/4 with essentially the exact ability. This is, I think, just a cool card with a lot of different stuff. There's, like Hollow Hound with this can be powerful. Any kind of yeah, this could be the priest take this and use it with like automaton or something would be kind of hilarious. But yeah, lots of like rush minions. If there are like charge minions, there aren't like I can't think of like I guess you could use this and like get like South Sea deckhands or something and charge your opponent down. But yeah, lots of like things that care about how big they are in Hunter with like battle cries, attack triggers, things like that. This could be quite good with. Next up, we have Chatty Macaw. Repeat the last spell you cast at an enemy at a random enemy if possible. So if you are playing like big, powerful targeted spells like Death Roll, this can be a way to take advantage of them. I can't really think of that many great enemy targeted spells you want to cast a lot in Hunter off the top of my head, because this doesn't do anything with spells that don't target an enemy minion, right? Like this won't do anything with tracking. This won't do anything with even like Star Power. Star Power does not target an enemy. It's a spell that damages enemies but doesn't target them. So there's some weirdness here that I think will end up confusing some people. But I feel like this is probably at its best again with like something like a Death Roll if you're looking to play like Control Burn Hunter. And so we have Cash of the Day. 1 cost 3/3 Rush. Battlecry summon a 2/1 Worm for your opponent. This is an interesting card. Being able to kill the worm for free would make this like really really powerful. Like if you have like if there were like a candle shot type card. But yeah, this does feel like it is a good board control card. for the early stages of the game, if someone has like a difficulty dealing with this, this could be a really powerful card against like aggro demon hunter, right? Like they play a 1/3, you're like, eat it. And that's one of the things that Hunter has historically sometimes had problems with, is your opponent just like playing a 1/3 on one, right? Where you're like, oh, I don't have great ways to like come back from being behind this. Whereas this is like, hey, this is going to give me the ability to dominate the board with my like 3/3 rush until you are actually able to remove this, and then potentially come back from that situation. Next, Ranger Gilly, a 6-cost 4/6 warrior tourist. With the end of your turn, get a 2/3 Cockalisk. Death Rattle, give all minions in your hand +2/+3. So this is a powerful hand buff effect. Like Death Rattle, like +2/+3 is really strong. The warrior tourist is an interesting effect in Hunter. It could be kind of funny to just try and play Highlander Hunter and use Ranger Gilly and just get Bran. The Bran costs 8 now. Is probably just way too bad. But like this, as a Death Rattle, there's lots of really powerful things to give +2/+3. Like again, if you are playing like a Highlander deck, Theodrin or whatever, whatever his name is, the attack all your opponent's stuff, really powerful to hand buff. Like if your opponent doesn't kill this immediately, just keep getting dudes every turn. And that it alone is like actually pretty powerful. So, obviously it just being a 2/3 Karkalisk and not like a taunt minion is not super relevant at that stage of the game, but it is still like giving you bodies that do matter. As far as like the warrior tourist cards, you can't get Bran. I was thinking you could get Bran. You can't because it's not from this set. We haven't actually gone to the warrior cards yet, so I don't actually have the 100% vision of everything that's possible. But I want to be able to get Bran because I wish it worked differently. Next, Parrot Sanctuary. 2-cost 2/3. Your next Battlecry minion costs 1 less. After you play a Battlecry minion, reopen this. I'm trying to think of like powerful Battlecry minions to like ramp out with this. I mean, you can even like ramp out like a King Crush, right? Like the King Plush you can ramp out with this. There's obviously the various parrots. This does allow you potentially to play multiple things in one turn, right? With your Sasquatch. Like, play a battle cry, although awkwardly the battle cries are things that it doesn't repeat itself. But like, yeah, Mukla is a battle cry, right? And Mukla is something that if you get a cheap Mukla and then get a Sasquatch out, getting the 10/10, you don't get the battle cry effect of giving them a bunch of stuff. So definitely a powerful thing to Sasquatch and get an extra copy of. Next up, Pet Parrot, a 2-cost 1/1 battle cry. Repeat the last 1-cost card you played. So kind of neat. You play a 1-drop, play this, get an extra copy of the 1-drop and a 1/1. Not necessarily like, hey, I got an extra body, but if you have like a cool, cool one, especially if you have one with like a negative battle cry, right? This could be a powerful way to get extra copies of that without the drawback. Next we have Furious Fowls. 6-cost spell, choose an enemy, summon 2 3/2 birds with immune while attacking to attack it. So this does work with your parrot that hits an enemy, right? Because this targets an enemy, and then you're like, all right, I'll play the repeat my thing that target an enemy. Boom, and this can just go straight to your opponent's face, right? This can just be bird burn or burn BIRN. I don't know. It is a interesting like removal / board presence thing. You could also theoretically use this with like Bunny Hopper to be able to like attack with the birds right away as rush minions, which does have some possible cool power to it. And lastly, we have the Trussy Fishing Rod. 3-cost 1/2. After your hero attacks, summon a 1-cost minion from your deck. So this, if you have buff effects, right? I can imagine there's like the amalgam, right? The neutral amalgam, which I'm not. Yeah, let's just go. Actually, I won't be able to find it because they're not labeled by name. But there's the 1-cost 1/2 amalgam that keeps buffs, right? And playing like that with this and bird watching and other ways to buff the guy could be pretty interesting, right? You just keep making these 1-cost guys, and you have these. You play 2 copies of this to summon them and resummon them in various ways to buff the amalgams. feels like it could be kind of interesting. You could play them with like magnetic stuff because they have all minion types. Um, but yeah, it definitely seems interesting. You could play this. This could be the card that you priest tourist for in your automaton deck, and you just summon your automatons with it. So yeah, all kinds of interesting options there. Uh, as far as like the overall set of hunter cards, I think Sasquatch is very interesting. Also, one of the more interesting cards to possibly tourist for. I think this guy is underrated. I've seen people saying that they think this guy's like the worst card in the set and things like that. I think that people really underrating the death rattle effect. I'm not sure exactly how we end up using the warrior tourist thing, but there are like warrior hand buff cards if you want to try a hand buff style deck that maybe you tourist those into your deck. And there are, I think, some pretty interesting and pretty powerful, tourist things that are or warrior things and hand buff things that are worth exploring. So I do think that the parrot is also an interesting thing. Being able to get an extra instance of say Death Coil in the right matchup can be very very powerful, and in other matchups having the ability to bring back say your Furious Fowls is also pretty cool. But Hunter's always in a weird spot where it's like when you have cards that are not hyper aggressive, it can be very difficult for some of the Hunter decks to really leverage them. We have obviously seen like mid range Reno style Hunter decks be reasonably powerful, but with the multiple nerfs to Reno, that card has gotten a lot harder for a mid-range style deck to use. So we shall see how Hunter does in Perils in Paradise. All right, next up, we have Mage. Our first card in Mage is Tsunami. 8-cost Frost spell. Summon 3/3/6 water elementals that freeze. They attack random enemies. This is a pretty cool card. Like, it gives you a board presence. It could potentially be just like 8 damage to your opponent if they have nothing in play. It being a frost spell means you can use it with Watercolor Artist and possibly get it, discounted repeatedly. It being an 8-cost spell gives you something to possibly use with the orb, the infinite projection orb that isn't Yogbox. So yeah, this is a pretty interesting card that I think has the possibility of like shutting down weapon decks, of just giving you cool board presence. Get it cool, because they're freezing things. Next up, we have Marooned Archmage. 3-cost 3/3 that says your first spell each turn costs 2 less. This is a pretty powerful effect. That obviously with Sorcerer's Apprentice, we've seen how powerful that can be. Obviously, this isn't Sorcerer's Apprentice in terms of being able to reduce all of your things to 0 because it is the first spell, but 2 less is a lot, right? Being able to play this, if it isn't removed, then just the next turn you can play a 6-cost spell. Notably, it does have the coin prep issue. You can't coin out a big thing because your coin is going to be your first spell. But yeah, certainly for any mage deck that isn't a full-on spell deck that wants to ramp into big spells, this has the potential. And there's some other things in this set that are also excellent for big spell decks, like not this one. There was the other one. I thought it was a different legendary. Anyway, this is Rayla Sand Sculptor, a 4-cost 2/5 with Paladin Tourist. After you cast a spell, summon a random 2-cost minion and give it Divine Shield. Obviously this is a very powerful trigger. A 5 health minion for 4 can be pretty difficult to kill as well. You're most likely going to want to use this and immediately start casting some spells. If, for instance, you have your Archmage that survives the turn, then you play this. You can play a 2-cost spell for free, and you can use things like Primordial Glyph to get free spells you can cast alongside this as well. Being able to like build up a board presence as mage is like rarely your sort of plan, but be able to get just a bunch of cheap spells into a bunch of Divine Shield minions means that even like mass removal isn't necessarily going to take them out. So certainly an interesting card. Next up we have Tide Pools, a 3-cost 3-cost location, discover a spell that costs 3 or less. After you cast a spell, reopen this. I do think this is more appealing to me than say the taunt one for Druid. I think that there's just a lot of great utility spells, and this being essentially a 3-cost 3-cost way that you just discover 3 spells. Obviously 3 spells that cost 3 or less, so they're not going to be like massive game-winning things, but maybe they are because maybe they're Primordial Glyph and they find you a massive game-winning thing. Just it feels like a pretty powerful effect. Very easy to reopen. If you're looking to chain cheap spells with say Rayla, in order to get a bunch of cheap minions, also works very, very well there. Next, we have Surfalopod. Surfalopod, not Cephalopod, Surfalopod. With 5 cost, 5/6 Beast. Battlecry, the next spell you draw is cast when drawn. So there are some cards in this set that are like, hey, big spells. This is one of them. This is a really powerful effect. If you are only playing big spells like, say, Tsunami, right? If you cast when drawn this, boom, hey, we just cast 8 mana worth of stuff for free. Super good, right? And you definitely want to play this specifically in a deck that's mostly playing big spells. We've seen big spell mage style decks before. I'm not sure if there's like enough good tools to do that right now, but this is certainly a very powerful spell for that style of deck. Next we have Rising Waves. Deal 2 damage to all minions. If none die, deal 2 more. This is a pretty powerful AoE type effect, right? And notably, this is like excellent against, say, Insanity Warlock, right? Where like you build boards of 3/3s and 3/4s. Like this can be a really, really easy way to just be like, boom, 4 damage AoE for 3 mana. That's very powerful, right? And in the situations where like you only need the 2 damage, great, also very good. So this is one of the better just like AoE type effects that I think that we have seen in quite some time. And like it's great against Divine Shield, right? If everyone has a board full of Divine Shields, hey, I didn't kill them with the first wave, here comes the second. Next up we have King Tide. Speaking of big spell cards, Battlecry, both players' spells cost 5 until the end of your next turn. So obviously a very strong way to support a big spell style deck. If you're playing a Surfalopod plus Tsunami plus whatever other big spells, certainly can help support that. I don't know necessarily what the other big spells will be, right? Like the other big spells, there's not like Dragonfire Amulet type effects in the current metagame. So I'm not really sure necessarily where you're going with this, but it is a very strong package of things. Notably, too, you can use this against opponents who are trying to play a bunch of cheap spells. Like, say, against Rogue, right? Like a Rogue opponent, this is going to shut down Shadow Step Breakdance. It's going to shut down all their Sonya shenanigans because everything, all their spells are going to cost 5. So that's a very powerful effect. But yeah, like there's basically the ones I can think of right now. Tsunami and like Sunfire Volley are the 2 really good big spells. I don't know if that's like enough, but can certainly see. Next we have Under the Sea. Draw a different spell. Summon a random minion of that spell's cost. That is another possible, like, decent big spell card if you're looking for, like, another thing, right, for that style of deck. If you're just playing, Under the Sea and then 9 and 10 cost, like 8, 9, 10 cost spells or whatever, great, That is another very reasonable inclusion in those style of decks that can give you board presence. Not quite as powerful, obviously, as actually casting the Tsunami or the Sunfire Volley, but certainly can give you another sort of payoff for being an all big spell deck that gives you a little bit more in the way of like hits for your things that care about drawing spells. Next, we have Go with the Flow. Choose a minion. If it's an enemy, freeze it. If it's friendly, give it spell damage +1. I mean, I can certainly see decks that are like, looking to be like cheap burn decks that are interested in this, because give you a little bit of flexibility if you're like looking to, do a bit more burn. You can get the spell damage for like, any sort of things that are particularly boosted by spell damage, and being able to buy you a little bit of time with the freeze effect. Just seems like it's probably not worth, Like if you're going to be looking for spell damage, you have a lot easier ways to get spell damage. If you're looking for freeze, there's a lot better ways to get freeze. And you probably don't want something that's not going to necessarily, really be as efficient in those sort of decks. And lastly, Sea Breeze Chalice. Deal 2 damage randomly split among all enemies. 3 drinks left. Well, this is definitely a card that cares about spell damage, right? Because this is one of the new drinks that are effectively like the banana / barrel of monkeys that we have seen previously. They are individual spells that you can cast up to 3 total times. You get them repeatedly in your hand. But yeah, this can be a very powerful way to take advantage of spell damage, because this is one spell that you can cast 3 times for 1 each. that each cast benefits from spell damage. So that's pretty powerful, right? Obviously, if your opponent has a big board, this can be less powerful. But if you can generate spell damage, like this card with like Sith, not that Sith needs help, but like this being a single spell that you can cast, to do as much damage. Granted, you're not going to replace the other things in Sith decks because the Sith decks can just burn past an opponent's board, whereas this has to go through their board first. But yeah, I think this is like also like a pretty reasonable card, like possibly against like aggressive decks. It may be too bad because like you could just hit your opponent in the face. If you cast this like turn one, it's like, okay, your opponent plays like say a Miracle Salesman. You can cast this. It's like only a like 50% chance that you actually kill the Miracle Salesman, right? Regardless, either way, I think this is like a card that like could be a powerful burn tool with spell damage if there weren't already better directions to do that with Sif. Overall, I think there's some pretty interesting stuff in Mage. My favorite stuff is definitely the big spell stuff. I think that King Tide is certainly an interesting and powerful card for like a big spell style deck that also has cool disruptive possibilities. And then that alongside like Surfalipod, giving you the ability to leverage Tsunami and Sunfire Volley, and then possibly even Under the Sea as like an extra way to take advantage of having big spells. I could very easily imagine just having one copy of this in those decks. That's like, hey, I want to use this. Even like playing Surfalipod on turn 5 into Under the Sea on turn 6, you're guaranteed to hit your other big spell and get the effect of this and get the effect of the cast when drawn from Surfalipod. So pretty powerful stuff, I think. May not necessarily be better than the other options that Mage has right now, like Sith Mage, but certainly, in my mind, much more interesting. All right, next up, we have Paladin. Boom. First card is Grill Master. 4-cost, 3/4, Battlecry, draw your lowest cost card. Death Rattle, draw your highest cost card. This is a weird card. It's super inefficient, like stat-wise. 4-cost, 3/4 is pretty bad with no like immediate board impact, but effectively having draw 2 cards connected to it and having it be specific cards is very powerful. Like being able to guarantee, you draw like a Ziliax or a Reno or, a Giant, right? Those are all like pretty powerful effects. And drawing your lowest cost card, being able to find, Righteous Protector or wide variety of like, possibilities available for this. So it's definitely an interesting card. Paladin does sometimes lack with certain builds in really having card draw value, and this definitely gives that in a very interesting way. So I do think this is a card that, despite being kind of like inefficient body-wise, has a lot of potential. Next, we have Sea Shanty. There is a possible big thing to draw with that. Just 10 cost. Summon 3 5/5 pirates. Cost 1 less for each spell you've cast on characters this game. Kind of a weird one. There's obviously like buff effects, healing effects, all work with this. Just summoning 3 5/5s feels like it's a pretty low payoff. They don't do anything right away. So like building a deck that's specifically designed with a payoff of, hey, I get some 5/5s kind of feels a little bit like disappointing overall. I even was playing like a Holy Paladin, right? And I was trying to play Holy Paladin with the glow stick thing as well as the 3/3 Gigantify guy who costs 1 less for each holy spell you've cast. And that just like never, even just getting like a bunch of like cheap 8/8s late in the game just never felt that good. Like how quickly does this get to be a reasonable thing to cast? Is this casting like 6, 7 mana? Like when are you casting this realistically? And it seems challenging to do that quickly. I mean, there are obviously some things like, say, this. No, this is yeah. Well, actually, this can kind of do it. At the end of your turn, getting 1-cost ice cream that gives +1/+2 last 3 turns. This is a card that gives you cheap ways to buff minions, but you have to then play minions and buff them. Giving you, it's this like you can't just like play them all at once. The sunscreen card itself, I actually am curious if it's a holy card, because that does matter for the holy deck. The sunscreen card itself is not a holy spell, so it doesn't work with the things that care about the holy spells, even though this itself is a holy spell. But it is a targeted thing that does work for sea shanty, which is fine. But again, like you're doing a lot of investment if you are trying to build a sea shanty deck in getting a payoff that is not that immediately crazy impactful. Next up, we have Divine Brew. This is a great way to enable the sea shanty as well as possibly the holy whatever spells. One cost, give a character Divine Shield if it already had one. Give it +1 attack this turn, which is interesting. You're not like the fact that it's only this turn means that you're not like able to use this as any kind of like long-term buff effect. It is give a character Divine Shield, right? You can use this on your hero, which is interesting. So you don't even necessarily need minions for this. Though you probably want minions for this because giving your hero +1 attack for a turn is rarely going to be that good. Though I mean, maybe you can use that, take out your opponent's cheap minions, which can sometimes be like a challenge for Paladin. So maybe it is better than I'm thinking. But notably, this does only care about casting spells on characters, so this does work even if you're using the Divine Brew on your face. Next up, we have Sun Snapper Linessa. Rogue Tourist, your spells that cost 2 or less cast twice. I am a little bit curious how that works with this, because that you've cast on characters, that this is cast twice. Doesn't say like repeat them. I wonder if this does work alongside the give you multiple discounts for sea shanty, because you are it is casting twice. It says each spell you've cast on characters. Unclear to me exactly based on the wording whether that multiple discounts the sea shanty. Rogue Tourist. We've not looked at the rogue cards yet. If you were able to use rogue from anything, be able to use sea shanty with the pirate who summons copies of each pirate you control would be hilarious. But you can't do that. You'd have to somehow get like a shoplifter gold beard, like from something. But unfortunately, the tourist does not get you that card. But yeah. This is, pretty powerful with just cheap buff spells. It obviously can use this very well. You can buff something for like several turns. Works with the sunscreens. One card getting you potentially 6 casts of this. Thanks to the Sunsapper Linessa, it does seem like it has the ability to be pretty powerful. Be able to double cast like Hand of Vidal is pretty strong. You can even like use this alongside, I assume, Holy Glow Sticks, right? Because you're supposed to cost 2 or less, cast twice. Holy Glow Sticks, if you've played a holy spell, costs 1, so you could potentially just like nuke your opponent for a bunch of damage with Holy Glow Sticks with this card as well, which is a pretty interesting idea. Next up, we have Volley Maul. I get it, volleyball. After your attack, get a 1-cost sunscreen that gives +1/+2. So lots of things that are like, hey, get things to target minions. There is a lot that's sort of like pushing you in the direction of trying to play this sea shanty style deck. Next, we have 6-cost, deal 4 damage, give a random friendly minion +4/+4 power spike. This is super inefficient. It is a holy spell. But like 6 mana for this is so much mana, Like obviously the combination of effects is pretty powerful, right? Like this is kind of similar to, like a Firelance Portal. It's obviously much weaker damage-wise than Firelance Portal, but you can effectively get like charge on the minion because it is a buff. But if you don't have a minion, it's horrible, right? So this feels like a pretty mediocre card to me overall. Could be used in like some sort of like burst combo finish because it gives you effectively 8 damage if you have like a charge minion or a minion in play, but seems unlikely to be. Next we have Lifeguard, a 4-cost 2/7 taunt. Battlecry, the next spell you cast has lifesteal. This is a pretty powerful card, right? Like a 2/7 taunt for 4 is, just a pretty powerful effect in general. The next spell you cast have lifesteal, like casting, like this in like a controlling style deck with like just consecration, right? Can be quite strong. Be able to consecration and gain a ton of life from the damage dealt to all of your opponent's minions. And this is not this turn. This is a banked effect. Notably, if you do play this and then play a spell that doesn't deal damage, it will consume the lifesteal buff to your next spell because that was your next spell, even if it didn't deal damage. It's not your next spell that does damage has lifesteal. So if you cast like this and then cast like Blessing of Kings, you don't do anything with it. It might seem like Blessing of Kings would give the thing that you target lifesteal because the spell has lifesteal, but that's not how it works. The spell itself has to, having lifesteal does not mean it transfers lifesteal to something else. Yeah, you would have to like cast Equality, cast this, cast Consecration if you wanted to gain life off of that. So yeah, I do think again, just a 2/7 taunt for 4 is a pretty high stat line to begin with. So this feels like a pretty powerful card for like a Paladin control deck. Next we have Service Ace. After this minion gains attack, reduce the cost of the highest cost card in your hand by 1. So this is an interesting card, along with the sunscreen producing effects. Like if you use this with life-saving aura, right, and you can play this and buff it a few times, that's multiple cost reductions from like effectively 2 cards and a body that your opponent has to deal with, right? This also can work with like an aura, right? Like you can have deputization aura and play this. I assume that would work, right? If you like just played this, I actually don't know how that would work. Whether it counts as gaining the attack if you play it next to a deputization, like just when you have a deputization aura. It would obviously work with like Crusader aura, but it would not work with deputization aura if you just played it into it because it just comes into play with that stat. I would guess be able to discount and like every deck these days has powerful things to discount like Ziliax, right? Be able to just like get your Ziliax down. Early can be very powerful. You can, potentially distribute the discounts across multiple things if this gets multiple discounts, and you have a number of high cost things. So this would not work with hand buffs, right? Because it is this text is only active when the minion is actually in play. So you don't get like buffing it in your hand and then reducing the cost of things. They don't have text active in their hand or in your hand rather. And the last Paladin card we have is Sankazel. This is a 3/8 rush that when it attacks, it becomes a location. And I actually have, there's the location it turns into, the Sandcastle. So it is a give a friendly minion +3 attack and rush, and then turns back into a minion. So this, from my understanding, the location scales with the guy, right? So if you give the guy more attack, the location scales with it, and if you give him more health, the durability of the location scales with it. So it's a really interesting thing. Like you could potentially use it like in a hand buff deck, right? And like get a bunch of guys rushing or get a bunch of like huge buffs on all of your minions. But yeah, it definitely seems like a very, very interesting card. I don't know everything you do with it. But this is like one of the cooler cards I think that in the expansion overall. I don't know like how the interaction of like the rush and the location works. Like, can you keep rushing into things and keep activating the location and other things? It's not totally clear to me. But like it kind of has Remornia vibes, right? If you have charge minions, you could potentially like use this. Attack into one of their guys. Like say this guy's like buffed. You attack into one of their guys. You use the location to buff a charge minion. Go face. Then he comes back. He rushes into another guy. You play another charge minion. You use the location on that to go face. I don't know if it works that way. I don't know if like the location stays closed, it flips back into the location. But either way, it is cool to have the ability to like basically have a big minion that you can like protect by turning it into location against board clear effects that are not Reno. So super cool card. Definitely my favorite, I think, of the overall Paladin cards. It does feel like it's pretty clear that this set of Paladin cards is largely trying to like push, hey, cast spell on minion deck. But again, I do feel like this, unless you get this off so fast, feels like it's just such a mediocre payoff that I don't really know that it's worth it. Like you have to play this in like turn 5 or 6, and even then it's like, okay, I built my deck with a bunch of like low impact cards to get this out quickly, and now I got some 5/5s. My opponent killed them, and now my deck doesn't do very much. I do really like this guy. I think this is just like a generically good value card that a lot of Paladin decks can use. But overall, I feel like I'm like medium unimpressed by the overall Paladin stuff. Lifeguard again feels like just a solid like role player and a control style deck that has damage based removal like Consecration. But Consecration, has kind of gotten largely obsoleted in terms of just how powerful it is. So it's possible that like this is just not overall worthwhile. You could use this a lot with like Prismatic Beam, right? And that ends up being a lot more effective for at least clearing your opponent's boards. But we shall see. Overall, like I said, not super enthused by overall what Paladin has. The tourist card is cool. The cast twice again, like I said, with stuff like Holy Glow Sticks is pretty exciting, and we'll have to take a look at what Rogue offers for their tourist cards for Paladin.